Hello, beautiful soul, and welcome to Love to Heal podcast, a podcast that outlines my soul's journey from atheism to Judaism. If you've been enjoying this show and would like to show your support, please comment, share, and review the podcast. And of course, follow me on Instagram and TikTok. I did change my username from Love to Heal podcast to my actual name, Yulia Frid, because now I have more than my podcast to offer. I have my memoir, which is currently available as an ebook on gumroad.com, but hopefully in a near future will also be available in print form. And to add to that, I'm working on publishing a series of children's spiritual picture books. So lots of new things coming. Very excited to announce all of that. Today is a fun episode that I've been waiting to share with all of you. It's fun because I had fun at this event, okay? And I can't stop thinking about it and talking about it. So in May of 2026, I had the honor of attending my very first Jewish Orthodox wedding. And I was ecstatic about it because I had heard how fun these weddings are. And also, of course, I was treating it as a learning opportunity because I had never been, and I knew I would walk away with so much new knowledge about Judaism and about Yiddishkeit. So the wedding, as strange as it may have sounded to some of my secular and non-Jewish friends, was to take place on a Tuesday, as any good Jewish wedding should be. And here's why. In Jewish tradition, Tuesday is considered a highly auspicious day for a wedding because it is the third day of creation. According to Genesis, it is the only day the Torah repeats the phrase, "And God saw that it was good," twice. This led sages to consider it doubly good or doubly blessed. When I received the invitation to the wedding, I had a ton of questions. What to wear, what to give as a gift, how long this event would be, would I be with my husband at all throughout the night, and many other questions that I suppose any newbie would ask. The invitation, by the way, calls for its own section of this episode, so let's talk about that first. It came in the mail, like any other wedding invitation. It was printed on elegant paper, and it provided a reply envelope. So all this was standard. But then we get into the differences. One side was written in English, while the other side was completely in Hebrew. It came from both sides of the family, and it read like this. "It is with joy and gratitude to Hashem that we take pleasure in inviting you to join us in celebrating the marriage of our dear children." Then the first names of the groom and bride were written below in large italics, and by the bride's name, I noticed there was written in little font a word in Hebrew. It's pronounced shetihi, meaning may she live or long live. Below that were two dates. The first was the Jewish date, using the Jewish calendar. So the date was the 10th of Sivan of the year 5786. The second date was the standard Gregorian calendar, or 26th of May. The difference between the two calendars lies in the fact that the Gregorian one is a solar dating system, which is used globally for civil timekeeping, whereas the Jewish calendar is a lunisolar system used primarily to calculate and observe religious dates, holidays, and Torah portions. However, I have learned that Jewish Orthodox communities, they use the Jewish calendars constantly. For example, to celebrate their birthdays according to the Jewish calendar. I'll never forget our visit to the Orthodox shul in New Orleans. My 5-year-old daughter, she became friends with the rabbi's daughter, who was also 5 years old. So when we were trying to figure out which one of them was older, the rabbi's daughter kept giving us her Jewish birthday and saying the months in Hebrew, which didn't help at all. And this year, our rabbi will be going to the Ohel, the burial site of the Rebbe, to celebrate his Jewish birthday. So I realized that Jewish Orthodox men and women and families, they really use the Jewish calendar quite a bit. I never knew my Jewish birthday, so I decided to look it up. And of course, in our day and age, it's a piece of cake to find it, thanks to Chabad.org and their Jewish birthday calculator. It's really easy. You plug in your standard birthday. The only thing you need to know, though, is the time of day that you were born, because in Judaism, the day begins at nightfall. So the result that I got was rather unexpected for me, because my birthday is normally in December, but my Jewish birthday is actually in June. So I thought that was really interesting, and I guess now I have another day in the year that I can celebrate myself. So if you're interested in finding out your Jewish birthday, do go to Chabad.org. I will also leave the link in the show notes. Okay, so let's get back to the wedding invitation. Below the dates was the schedule of the wedding. First up was something called Kabbalas Panim at 5:30 p.m. Kabbalas Panim is the traditional welcoming reception, which occurs just before a Jewish wedding ceremony. It features separate rooms for the couple. There is a decorated throne area, if you will, where the bride greets her guests. And then in a separate room, there's a lively tish or table where the groom is toasted and sings with male guests. This costume is packed with meaning and joyous celebration as the couple prepares for the chuppah, which is the wedding canopy. And that was scheduled for 6:30 p.m. After that, there would be dinner and dancing for the rest of the night. Below this information on the invitation was the address of the synagogue, which is one of the largest, if not the largest, Orthodox synagogue in our city. And then under that, there were the names of the parents of the groom and bride. And under their names, it said, honored grandparents, listing the names of the grandparents as well. When I read the names of the grandparents, I learned something interesting. The bride's grandparents were written as Rabbi, Leibel, and Devanya, while the groom's grandparents were written as R apostrophe Moishe and Toibi, followed by their last names. The rabbi title was obvious, but R apostrophe? That, honestly, I was not sure what that meant. I had seen it previously elsewhere. I don't remember where. But I realized it was different from rabbi. I thought maybe it was an abbreviation for rabbi, but no. So I looked it up, and it turns out that R apostrophe is short for Reb. But what does Reb mean? Is that short for rabbi? No, it is actually a traditional Yiddish honorific. So Reb functions much like the English word Mr., and it's placed before a man's first name to show respect and politeness, but it has nothing to do with rabbi. Then, prior to the wedding, when I was speaking to our rabbi about all sorts of things wedding related, he mentioned that they always invited their whole congregation to their kids' weddings. He said while it was a joyous and important event for the family, it was just as important for them as our Chabad leaders to include people like us so we could learn Jewish traditions hands-on. You see, Chabad is all about being selfless. It's all about bringing the stray Jews back to the herd, so to speak. And honestly, this is why we love Chabad so much. If not for our shluchim, Rabbi and his wife, and his family as a whole, I would have never attended a bris, a hair-cutting ceremony for boys at age 3, a wedding, a Passover for Brengen. I mean, the opportunities of hands-on learning that they have given us, where we can learn and experience Yiddishkeit, the opportunities have been countless. And we, speaking on behalf of my husband here too, we are forever grateful to them. knowing that our whole congregation was invited, in addition to the bride and groom's families that you can imagine are very large, we knew this wedding was going to be huge. I'm actually not going to say the number of guests because it is traditionally taught that counting Jewish people directly with numbers is inappropriate or even forbidden. This idea stems from the belief that reducing individuals to a number strips them of their unique identity, and it leaves them vulnerable to the evil eye or heavenly judgment. So, I urge you to use your imagination here on the number of guests. But let's just say it was a huge wedding. To prepare for the wedding, I also had to prepare for the wedding. I had to find a dress first. I happened to have a very modest cocktail dress with long sleeves that was actually waiting for the proper occasion, but it was all black, so I had to find out if this color was appropriate or not. I found out that black was perfectly fine along with all the other colors, except you don't want to wear the brightest neons. And red, you never want to wear that color because red is explicitly discouraged by Jewish law since it's historically associated with frivolity and it was worn by ancient cultures to signify high status or to attract the eye. Also, white, cream, or ivory colors should be reserved for the bride and groom. Now that I had my dress figured out, I moved on to the shoes. And here's the conundrum. First of all, technically, shoes should be closed toe and closed heel, unless you wear tights, which I really didn't feel like wearing. It was a really warm day, and just wearing tights is always a pain. However, I still could have worn technically any shoes because Chabad is so accepting of everyone, no matter their choice of dress. I knew not to overthink this, so I opted for my black high-heeled, closed-toe, but open-heel shoes. But that's not all that went into the decision-making here. You see, Jewish weddings are known for their abundant dancing, so it's important that your shoes allow you to dance the night away. Thanks to my 30 years of ballroom dancing in high heels, I knew that I could pull it off that night in my high heels and look pretty. So that was my decision. And then I spoke to one of our rabbi's daughters about the gift. And she said, typically people bring monetary gifts. It is totally up to you how much you want to give. It does not have to be in the amounts of multiples of 18, which was surprising to me. So we just chose a number that we felt comfortable with. And the evening of the wedding, I went to write a check as a gift. And as I was writing the check, I looked over at the number of the check, which I never do because I don't really write out a lot of checks nowadays. But something prompted me to look over at the number of the check and guess what number check it was. 613. Like the 613 commandments or mitzvot. At this point, I think I froze. I was stunned at the coincidence, which of course I know was not a coincidence at all, because there's no such thing. Everything is a plan or a sign from God. Sometimes it's tricky to interpret the signs, but for me personally, this number signified the importance of the observance of the commandments. And this was yet another nudge for me to take on more mitzvahs, to keep going in that same direction, to keep growing. Everything aligned that night. Not only this, I will tell you more in just a bit. So with this good sign, my husband and I and our oldest daughter, who is now 18, we headed to the synagogue. My stepdaughter, she was actually invited to babysit the numerous babies that would be at the wedding because this girl, she is the queen of babies. She's the best. She had already babysat for our rabbi's grandkids on many occasions throughout the years, so she was very excited as well. When we arrived and walked to the entrance of the synagogue, kid you not, I felt like I was at a red carpet event. The dresses that the Orthodox women were wearing were just stunning, to say the least. They all looked like princesses. And as we were walking in, our rabbi's oldest daughter greeted us. She looked beautiful, and she helped us find our names on the seating chart. We understood that dinner and dancing were going to be separate for men and women, so my husband and I each took our respective name cards and the table number, and then we saw that we were seated with many of our Russian friends, which was great. And then we headed to Kabbalas Panim reception, which was set up in one of the lobbies of the synagogue. There were very heavy hors d'oeuvres, so heavy that I thought maybe that was the dinner itself. Everything was set up absolutely beautifully, buffet style. There were different types of finger foods, dessert too. I wasn't even sure what to start with, and I wasn't that hungry yet, and I was talking to so many people, so I didn't get to taste a lot of the foods, but it looked delicious. There was an open bar, of course, and at this point, we were all, men and women, we were all mingling and congratulating the bride. She was sitting on, they call it a throne, but it's like a low stage that has a little couch with room for her, her mother, her grandmother, and then anybody else who wants to sit by her side to congratulate her, to take pictures with her. And I learned that evening that supposedly there's a tradition for women to whisper marital advice to the bride, and then she in return gives a blessing to anyone who approaches her. In Jewish tradition, the bride is treated like a queen on her wedding day, and she's believed to have the spiritual power to grant blessings to others. This was my first time approaching a Jewish bride, so I was a little bit nervous and at a loss for words, to be honest. So I ended up just hugging her and congratulating her. And so I didn't give her any advice, but I think it was optional. And hopefully she gave me a blessing. The bride, by the way, looked like a princess. No joke. She had a gorgeous princess-style, long-sleeve, white dress with a veil. Just absolutely beautiful. Meanwhile, the men, what were they doing? In a separate room, the groom was also preparing for chuppah, but in his own way. He is treated like a king, but in a separate room where there's singing and toasting and lively dancing with male relatives and closest friends. It's a highly joyous and energetic atmosphere, and they often feature celebratory drinks like whiskey. Mind you, it is an ancient custom for the groom and the bride to fast on their wedding day from dawn until the completion of the ceremony. The fast serves as a personal Yom Kippur. This allows the couple to repent for their past sins, to seek forgiveness, and to enter their marriage with a clean slate. Knowing this, that they didn't eat for the whole day, it wasn't surprising when later we saw the groom looking quite weak after not eating anything, but having had a drink or two at the tish, at the men's celebration. Sometime into the ceremony, the crowd parted in two, like literally split into two, and then we saw a bunch of men, a bunch of Orthodox men sort of storm in, if you will. And here we saw the groom, the rabbi, the fathers, the whole entourage. They rushed in for what is called the bedeken. Bedeken is the veiling ceremony. This occurs just before the main wedding ceremony. The groom is joyously escorted to the bride to lower her veil. And we're not talking about a see-through veil here. We're talking about a solid white veil. So the bride cannot see anything once the veil is lowered. This intimate moment acts as a first look. It symbolizes modesty, spiritual connection, and the couple's distinct identities within marriage. I should probably mention too that the couple does not see each other for a whole week prior to the wedding. So then this ceremony, bedeken, also serves as the first glance at each other, just like in the Bible. In Genesis, when Rebecca veils herself as she's told that Isaac is approaching. After this, we were all guided to another synagogue. This was a Chabad shul, just I think maybe 2 doors down from the other synagogue. The area where the wedding was taking place, this is our most religious neighborhood in our city. So there are several synagogues right next to each other, as well as mikvahs and other Jewish establishments. So it was a very short walk, like I said, 1 or 2 doors down. And there, the grounds of this Chabad center were transformed into a lovely setting for the chuppah, which traditionally should be constructed outdoors. The chuppah must be open on all 4 sides. This honors the biblical tent of Abraham and Sarah, signifying that all guests are welcome. Let me explain about the chuppah a little bit more. It is the traditional wedding canopy under which a Jewish couple stands during their marriage ceremony. It consists of a cloth stretched over 4 poles, and it symbolizes the new home the couple will build and share together. Once everybody was settled in, we saw the bride and the groom being walked down the aisle by their respective parents. Remember, I told you that the bride's veil is not see-through. It's a solid white color. So her mother, our Rebbetzin, literally led her to the spot under the chuppah where the groom was standing. And then she helped her circle the groom 7 times to create a protective wall and symbolize the building of a new life together. This is then followed by recitation of blessings over wine and the reading of the ketubah, which is a marriage contract. Then the groom places a plain wedding ring on the bride's forefinger and recites the traditional marriage declaration. All this is happening while the veil is still on the bride's face, covering her face. After this, 7 marital blessings are recited over a second cup of wine, celebrating joy, companionship, and the creation of the world. Finally, the ceremony concludes when the groom shatters a glass with his foot, which serves as a touching reminder of the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem and a symbol that love endures forever. Also, I want to mention that throughout the whole chuppah ceremony, the bride and groom were with their backs to us. And like I said, the bride's face was covered with a veil. At the end, the veil is lifted. The couple turns to face everyone. And of course, all the guests, they applaud and they whistle, they make noise, because now the ceremony is concluded and the couple is officially married. I also want to add that during the chuppah, our rabbi, one of his sons, then one of his brothers, and some other family members, there were many guests, and I can't remember exactly who came up on the chuppah stage, but many men came up to recite various blessings and also to give speeches. And then our rabbi announced that during a wedding, not only the newlyweds receive the blessings, but actually everyone in attendance is automatically blessed. And that was an ideal time during the chuppah to ask Hashem for help, for guidance, or for a specific blessing. It could be for health, for success, whatever it may be that you need at the moment. I asked what I usually ask for my children to love Yiddishkeit, and also for my success with my memoir that I wish to publish. The whole thing was very emotional, even for me, who is not part of their family. But still, I'm part of the Jewish family. We have to remember that Jews are all one big mishpacha. And if I teared up at this wedding, oh my goodness, I can't even imagine what will happen at my children's weddings. I will probably be sobbing. But of course, tears of joy. Oh, and I should add too that the weather was absolutely perfect. Knowing Cleveland, Ohio, it could have rained, it could have snowed, could have thundered, or it could have been scorching hot because it was at the end of May. But that day, it was simply ideal. It was warm, it was sunny, it was blue skies, it was just, everything was perfect. So after this beautiful ceremony, we all headed back to the larger synagogue, the first one that we were originally in, and there we would have dinner and dancing. I went into the banquet hall and was honestly mesmerized. The tables were stunning. They had grand flower centerpieces, classy plating and silverware. It was like a fairy tale. Already on the tables, there were some salads and bread, so we could have a little bit to eat. I sat down with 7 other Russian women from my synagogue, which was great. I knew some of them were newer to me, so I had a lovely chat with them. I told everyone about my book, which, as I mentioned, is available as an ebook right now. You can check the show notes for the link. And this is where my blessing came into reality, literally 20 minutes after I had asked for it during the chuppah. One of the women at the table, she seems to know everyone in the Jewish community, went ahead and introduced me to another woman who would put me in contact with a local publishing company. Is that crazy or what? I was speechless. I still am. After talking to this lady, we went back to our table and there was already a soup set on the table. And I believe after this second course, I hope I remember correctly because I did have a glass of wine or two, the bride came into the room and she stood in the doorway for just a few moments, and all of a sudden, all her friends, these are a bunch of young girls in their early 20s, they all got up and started passing out long stem white roses. At this point, the music was blasting an upbeat Jewish melody, and everybody was urged to get up and make a sort of tunnel for the bride to pass through. I had never seen anything like this, so I was just following the crowd. We stood there making a tunnel with our roses up above our heads, creating this sort of flower tunnel. The bride ran through it right onto the dance floor, and that's when the party really began. All the women gathered on the dance floor, making maybe 5 or more circles, holding hands, spinning around the bride in different directions. It was so much fun. At first, the bride was in the middle with different friends, sort of taking turns, dancing with one, then the other, or it might have been a group. Eventually, I think everyone got to go into the middle circle to dance with the bride. After, I want to say, a good hour of this kind of upbeat, circling, dancing, the bride's friends brought a chair for her to sit on in the middle of the circle. So the guests continued to dance around her. But that was great because then she could rest since she hadn't eaten during the whole day and it was already getting pretty late. So she was getting tired. And her friends, they would do this for her. They would bring her a chair. She would take a few moments to rest and get her strength back, and then they would take the chair back out. And so like this, it continued for a long time. I gotta say, those girls, man, the way they were dancing, the energy, the skill, the fun they had, oh my gosh, I cannot put it into words. And all those girls, they were very smart. They brought tennis shoes to change into for the dancing. So they had a blast, probably until midnight or so. At some point, we took a break from dancing for the actual dinner. The dinner was really good. They served chicken with rice and veggies. and then finished with a variety of desserts. There was not a cake. This is not a Jewish tradition. Throughout the evening, women and men would mingle outside the hall by the bar. And when I finally found my husband, he told me all about the fun that they were having on their side of the room. I tried to peek through the separation, which is called the mechitza, which is like this sort of wall that's put there. It's not permanent. And I knew the guys were having fun, but I couldn't tell exactly what was going on. But then my husband told me that they were having a crazy good time. They had men putting the groom and a rabbi also onto their shoulders and dancing like that. He showed me a video. I mean, it was unbelievable. Then I also had the pleasure of speaking to my Rebbitzin sister, who was the very first Jewish Orthodox person that I met upon moving to the United States back in 1998. She was the first one to invite my family to a Passover dinner and to other events. I rarely see her now because she lives in Akron, which is about 40 minutes away from Cleveland. But occasionally I see her at community events, and it's always so wonderful to reminisce and to realize how far I've come from completely secular to, well, observing quite a few mitzvahs. Here's where I give myself a pat on the back. And then around 10:30 p.m., I saw that my husband was already very tipsy, as were many other guests. And since he had to fly out for work the following day at 6 a.m., I made the decision to leave. We went looking for our daughter and found her in the baby room with a bunch of other girls her age who were chatting up a storm. Of course, she didn't want to leave because she was having a blast. So she ended up staying until the end, and one of the girls drove her home. When we got home, I couldn't stop thinking about the wedding. A few weeks prior, when we received the invitation, I told some of my friends and family members about it, and their response was, "Oh, it's not going to be that fun because you and your husband won't be together most of the night, blah, blah, blah." But they were so wrong. This was the most fun event of the year. And I'm so grateful that I'm part of a Jewish community in which I feel comfortable and I feel amongst friends. There's really just no comparison to anything. And if you get invited to any Jewish Orthodox events, do not skip out. You will enjoy yourself so much and you will learn a ton. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time.